So this is going to be episode 9 of How They Got Me Fucked Up, my problems with the modern day Republican Party. So I consider myself like a social libertarian, meaning there's shit that you might like, that you might agree with. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I do agree that you should have every right to do it, even though you're not harming someone else. For example, there was this professor from Columbia University. I want to say a professor of psychology. He got on the Breakfast Club and many other outlets and openly stated like, hey, at the end of the night, I want to do heroin. Okay, obviously this man is good at his profession. For him to be able to go to an elite school like Columbia University, for him to obviously be have a doctorate in psychology, obviously has went through undergrad and grad school. But when you say that you want to do heroin, like, I'll smoke some weed, I'll drink a couple beers, I'll have a few shots, I might even do shrooms, something like that. But when you start talking about some heroin, meth, crack, cocaine, all this other stuff, even opioids, I hell no, fuck no. But I agree that if you're still a respectable citizen, that you're still obeying other laws, that you're, still being responsible, taking care of your family, taking care of your duties, going to work, being productive, then if you can handle that, then by all means, you should do that. So with that being said, I'm obviously a libertarian on drugs. So therefore, I don't believe that the war on drugs is constitutional. I also don't believe that you cannot continuously lock people up and hope that they deter from drugs, which is literally the stupidest thing ever. We've had multiple presidents, we've had multiple administrations, we've had both political parties sit here and do a full-out war with the war on drugs for, since the 70s, going on 50 years, and this prohibition has not fucking worked. And so leading into that, that's one of the reasons why I don't fuck with the modern day Republican Party. So, the Republicans that I fuck with is President Grant, who is also a general during the Civil War. Amazing history. You should definitely look it up. He was pretty much the most progressive in the Republican Party or the Whig Party. I'm not a fan of Lincoln. I do give credit where credit's due with the Emancipation Proclamation. But Lincoln's objective was a military objective. It wasn't necessarily a moral objective. And some historians do say it was a moral objective for him to free slaves. But from many of the comments that he made, he probably could have just been making those comments just to appease Southern slave owners, just appease some of the more Democratic-leaning Republican Whigs at that time, and also to appease his wife, who was also pro-slavery. But we do see that there's a historical context of Lincoln being anti-slavery. But if you go to Lincoln Memorial, you definitely read his comments where he was like, I never intended to free slaves or end slavery. So that's what he said. So, but I also consider myself more of the progressive part of the Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy was a great commander, great soldier. He was he made sure that police officers, when he was the chief, that he made sure that people followed the Constitution, that people obeyed the laws, that there wasn't corruption going on police departments. He was also very progressive when it came to race issues, not necessarily as much as to the Native Americans and maybe the Asians, but as far as the black community, he was very progressive, was one of the first presidents to ever invite a black man to the White House. And Democrats at that time had a fucking fit. They started hanging niggas left and right, and it was just bad retaliation. But that is the kind of Republican figures that I gravitate towards. More of the modern day Republicans that I gravitate toward is Saagar Enjeti. He is a political commentator, news anchor he used to work for The Hill, but now him and Crystal Ball, they do breaking points on YouTube as independent media. And many of his conservative philosophy of modern day philosophy, I do agree with. Kind of mimics a lot of the Teddy Roosevelt power to the people workers' rights, unionization, making sure that the middle class, the backbone of America, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, have the access that they need, and that we are no longer in a corporatocracy. He was very anti-monopoly. He was, made sure that soldiers and veterans had rights. He was very much what you would consider as a progressive Republican conservative. For most of my life, I have grown up outside of Charlotte. I'm 20 minutes down the road from like the heart of Charlotte, but at the same time, Charlotte used to be a country town. It used to be a small town. Small knit community is always a bigger city, and is obviously developed, especially aspiring to be the next Atlanta, Miami, stuff like that. Also, trying to stay in the forefront of being progressive and stuff like that. But the reality is, it's a small town community. It's definitely has grown. It's definitely shaped itself. But outside of that is the country. So we do have many Southern values. Many of us do agree with guns. We do agree with not just, handguns, but, what they consider assault rifles, which we know legally can't have. So we also have more of, still the Bible Belt here. So we definitely, lean more towards Christianity, and many of those conservative values. And also growing up in a small town, you do have that small town community. So therefore, those values run rampant, especially here in the South. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But my problem becomes when you have politicians like Senator Richard Burr, who literally got in there and was insider trading during a pandemic. We have Thom Tillis, who is legitly the next moron outside of Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell. Lindsey Graham has no backbone. He is a corporatist when he needs to be. He's a populist when he needs to be. He is for Trump when he needs to be. He's against Trump when he needs to be. Like, this man has no political ideology whatsoever, and he literally is paid to say whatever, do whatever, and whatever to keep himself in office. He's purely based out of survival. He is a RINO. Same thing with Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, his wife is Elaine Chao, who has deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party. And the reason why many of these corporations sell out to China is because of people like Mitch McConnell and the policies of right-wing Democrats who have literally allowed things like TTP to go on, NAFTA to go on, and literally sell our country out to China, to the Chinese government, and to other third world countries, instead of allowing the American population, American citizenship, to be able to accumulate wealth. They decided to make shortcuts, sell to Mexico, produce in Mexico, to produce in places like Vietnam and India. And the whole time we're getting cheaper products, lower quality products that have literally depleted the American manufacturing, the American production, which has been the backbone, especially since the Industrial Revolution, would actually help build and catapult America to be the number one country for many years, until more recent years. I do believe that women, I might not necessarily have to agree with abortion. I might not necessarily agree with the history of Planned Parenthood, especially with Margaret Sanger, who is a Democrat, who literally only wanted to kill Negro babies. And that's one of the reasons why we do see many of these abortion clinics and these Planned Parenthood clinics in the urban centers, in the urban ghettos, to make sure that, Black people kill their babies. That's pretty much what the ultimate objective was. Of course, it does offer many things like women to be able to test for cancer, birth control, women being able to just have access to just regular medical care. So there is positives and negatives, but I do believe that The Republican Party has leaned so far onto anti-abortion sentiment that we have not asked what these judges, what these senators actually believe. These judges, these senators will literally sell us out to the major corporation, to the Koch brothers, to whoever was willing to line their pockets in exchange for selling us out. Every day that we sit here and allow, that we do not ask, and we sit here and allow these senators, these House representatives to devise laws, is every day that they violate the Constitution. That's the reality. And we can sit here and blame the Democrats for many things, and they are to be blamed for many things. But the reality is we can't sit here and say that the conservative party is a better party, especially when most conservatives, especially in the South, actually smoke weed. And then here we are, we still allow these politicians to be advocates for the war on drugs. It's preposterous to sit here and think that. And then, we have people like Rand Paul, who is anti war on drugs, who does believe in second chances, great politician in many ways. But when he starts talking about economics, he is definitely not for the American people, except for when he does talk about balancing the debt. We do need to, we definitely have to consider balancing the debt. But at the same time, it's hard to consider balancing the debt when we are pro-war. I mean, Bush was the one who legitimately violated the Constitution, asked Congress for more powers, more war powers, that the Constitution literally says that Congress only has the power of the purse and the power of war. And we've literally allowed Bush, Obama, Trump, and now Biden to legitimately keep us in a 20-year war. We went from not only Afghanistan and the Taliban to Iraq to Saddam Hussein. Now we're in Yemen. Now we're in this country, that country. We're trillions of dollars in the hole. We have money. We can print. We have all this quantitative easing. We have this money printer that goes Burr. We have Jerome Powell just saying, we're just going to print more money. Trillions of dollars for a war that none of us signed up for. We got the people who did 9/11. They've been dead for over a decade. And we've literally allowed another country, we've allowed this so-called terrorist organization who's been around since the 80s to stay in power. We're the same ones who trained Osama bin Laden. Like, let's call spade a spade. And with that even being said, we actually have to back it up. The only reason why we're even in Afghanistan is for oil and poppy. And how do you combat the war on drugs when you sit here and you're protecting Afghani poppy farmers? That's beyond me. So then you look at how the war on drugs was founded. So it had an anti-Asian sentiment. There was obviously the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, which was anti-Asian legislation that was put in place, especially in places like California, out west, that targeted the Chinese and Asian communities. And so there was heroin dens or poppy dens, and people were smoking poppy. So that's how the war on drugs against opium started. Then in the 1930s, you had people like Harry J. Anslinger, who was a known racist. I want to say, don't quote me for sure, but I feel like he was a Democratic operative as well. Him and J. Edgar Hoover, they were definitely, long story short, they were racist and they were evil men. And so Harry J. Anslinger allowed many of these pharmaceutical companies to introduce legislation that combated marijuana. The word marijuana in itself is an anti-Mexican word, racist word, but in itself. And so here comes the Marijuana Tax Act. It was the 1930s. They start pushing more of these pharmaceutical drugs over, marijuana, cannabis, something that people can grow in their yard, that doctors had been prescribing, that had easy access. And so now that people had wide access to that, they wanted to make sure that people bought from these pharmaceutical companies that they couldn't just have access. They couldn't just grow in their yard, or they couldn't just go down to the local pharmacy and get. And so then, you allow that plus, J. Edgar Hoover, his anti-hippie sentiment, his anti-black sentiment also transpired into Richard Nixon. We also know that Richard Nixon was not this great president. He was the one who introduced the 1970s legislation and the 1970s treaties to literally start the war on drugs. And the whole objective for that was to combat his political dissidents, which we also know he went to the step as far as to go to the Watergate Hotel just to spy on the Democrats. And because blacks and hippies were his opposition at that time, he felt that it was a good idea to go after what they were doing. And many of them were into the whole psychedelics and, marijuana and, this whole free-flowing movement that was taking place in the late 60s and 70s. Especially like with things like Woodstock, the anti-Vietnam sentiment. So in order for him to attempt to keep power, he and others in his administration passed this legislation. So boom, here comes Ronald Reagan. He's supposed to be this great guy, this, anti-communist person. In order to stop communism, he actually allows more drugs to enter and flow into the United States. So this is how crazy stuff is. The Boland Amendment prevented him to be able to sell arms to the Iranians. So some are saying, especially in his administration, are saying that he had already planned meetings and set up a deal with the Iranians during the Jimmy Carter election of, the 79 election, 80 election, and actually told them to keep the American hostages. That way that when he became president, he could be able to combat that. So he had a deal with the Iranians, which ended up allowing the CIA to sell them guns. They used that to be able to fund the Contra War, which was an anti-communist battle that was only based to try to stop the spread of Cuban communism and the Fidel and Che Guevara ideology. So this is the same dude who's supposed to be the father of conservatism and protecting the Constitution and the American rights. And the whole time he's literally allowing the CIA to bring in drugs through Rick Ross, through Norm Menendez, Oliver North, John Poindexter, Robert McFarland. All these people are sitting here in this whole cahoots with Manuel Noriega, and even Daddy Bush was the CIA director and ended up pardoning a lot of these actors if they weren't incarcerated. So you have somebody like Rick Ross who ends up getting life sentences for drugs that the United States government was bringing in or willingly turned a blind eye to. And so now we have legitly allowed people like Joe Biden to dictate these drug laws in the late 80s, to legitly lock up millions of white people who have been affected by not only various recessions, but their wealth has receded. Their jobs have gone overseas. So many are definitely turning to, the opioids. Meth is back out. It's hitting hard. Black people have already been conditioned with the crack epidemic of the 80s. Now you have many of these entertainers and rappers pushing the whole promethazine, lean, Loratab, Roxy. So now the opioid epidemic is taking a further toll, and not including that we legitly have half the country saying that it's cool to smoke weed. You have the other half of the country saying it's not cool to smoke weed. And you also have the federal government who is giving conflicting statements. You have people like Mitch McConnell, who's not trying to end the war on drugs or, legalize marijuana. And then you have somebody like Clarence Thomas, who has shown to be a great advocate for marijuana legalization. So we conservatives or independents who lean conservatively have to get this together. There's certain things that we have to get together, especially if you want to stop liberal ideology. And in many ways, liberal ideology is very dangerous and should be combated. Not like all liberal ideology, of course, but many of the far left thinking, many of the cultural war thinking it provides no benefit to anyone. So this is an overall video of why I hate the Republican Party, especially of the modern day. Like, share, comment, subscribe, comment below. Make sure that you check the notification bell. That way you can get uploaded. You can get instant videos as soon as I upload it. Y'all have a good one.